Two neighbors, same street, same decade. Both started working in their late 20s with ordinary salaries, ordinary jobs, and no inheritance waiting for them anywhere. The first one did everything the culture told him to do. He bought a new car when the old one still ran perfectly. He upgraded his house when his income grew. He wore the right brands, took the visible vacations, and kept his lifestyle exactly in step with every raise he received. By 50, he had a beautiful life on the surface and almost nothing underneath it. No meaningful savings. A retirement account that would require working well into his 70s to become sufficient. A mortgage that still had 18 years left on it. And a quiet, persistent anxiety he had learned to suppress by buying things. The second neighbor, nobody really noticed. She drove a 12-year-old car with 180,000 miles on it. She lived in the same modest house for 2 decades. She didn't post about money, didn't talk about money, and didn't appear to be doing anything particularly interesting with money. By 50, she had $400,000 in index funds, 2 paid-off rental properties generating passive income every month, and the ability to walk away from her job at any moment she chose because the choice was entirely hers. Same street, same era, completely different financial realities. The difference between those two people is not luck. It is not income. It is not even intelligence. It is a way of thinking about money that one entire generation stumbled onto almost by accident and then quietly used to build more wealth than anyone expected. My name is Zik, and today I'm going to show you exactly how Generation X thinks about money differently, why those differences produced results the data now confirms, and what any of us can take from their playbook, regardless of when we were born. Before we go further, let me show you the foundation everything else is built on. Before I get into the specific strategies, I need to show you the foundation underneath all of them. Because without understanding this first, the rest of it looks like a collection of random habits rather than a coherent philosophy. Gen X came of age in a specific window of time that will never exist again. Information had become accessible, but it had not yet become overwhelming. If you wanted to understand investing in 1996, you could not simply open an app and get an algorithm's opinion. You went to the library, you read actual books, you subscribed to Money Magazine and read it cover to cover. You found early online forums where people were sharing genuine knowledge rather than selling courses. You studied Warren Buffett's annual letters before he became a cultural meme. You learned slowly, thoroughly, with actual comprehension rather than headline skimming. And then the market taught them lessons no book ever could. The dot-com collapse between 1999 and 2001 was Gen X's first expensive education. Many of them lost money on technology stocks they had bought without truly understanding what the companies actually did. The experience was painful, but instead of swearing off markets forever, most of them did something different. They studied what went wrong. They learned the difference between a company with actual earnings and a company running entirely on narrative and momentum. They learned that when everyone around you is talking about easy money, that is almost always precisely when caution is most warranted. These were not theoretical lessons absorbed from a textbook. They were expensive mistakes paid for in real dollars and metabolized into genuine understanding. So when 2008 arrived and the S&P 500 dropped 57% from peak to trough, when credible voices were appearing on every channel saying this time was different, this time the system might not recover. Gen X had the lowest panic selling rate of any generation. Fidelity's data from that period confirmed it. They didn't sell because they understood what they owned and why they owned it, and understanding is the only thing that holds when fear enters the room. That self-built knowledge base is the foundation. Everything else Gen X did with money rests on it. When you truly understand something, you don't panic when it moves against you. You don't chase what's trending. You don't abandon a strategy because the market had a bad quarter. You make boring, consistent decisions that compound across decades. That is not exciting. It is also not optional if you want the result. Lesson 1. They turn their entire life into a portfolio Here is where Gen X thinking diverges most sharply from conventional financial advice, and it's the insight I want you to sit with longest. Most people apply the concept of diversification only to their investments, split your money between stocks and bonds, and you're diversified. Gen X applied it to everything: their careers, their income sources, their skills. Their entire economic life became a portfolio designed to survive any condition the economy might produce. Census Bureau data shows that 34% of Gen X workers have income from more than one source, compared to 28% of millennials and 19% of boomers. But the more important difference is not the number. It is the intention behind it. This was not about following a passion or building a personal brand or becoming an entrepreneur. This was strategic redundancy, deliberate backup planning. The same logic an engineer uses when designing a critical system, you never allow a single point of failure. Picture what this looked like in a typical Gen X household in 2015. One spouse working a corporate job with benefits, earning $75,000 annually. The other runs a small home-based business bringing in $35,000. One rental property generating $12,000 per year after expenses. That is 3 completely independent income streams. If any single one disappears, a layoff, a slow business quarter, a vacancy in the rental, the household does not collapse. It adjusts. It absorbs the shock and continues forward. This is not a complicated wealth strategy. It is practical survival architecture that generates wealth as a natural consequence. And when 2008 arrived, this structure proved its value in a way nothing else could have. Gen X had the lowest unemployment duration of any generation during the recession. When one income source disappeared, others remained. When the housing market collapsed and properties were selling at 40% below their 2006 peaks, Gen X had the cash flow from multiple sources to move to buy discounted assets while everyone else was paralyzed by fear. They didn't do this because they were brave. They did it because their diversified foundation gave them the stability to act when others could not. Bankrate's 2023 Financial Security Survey found that Gen X reports feeling more financially secure than any other generation, despite having less total wealth than boomers. That result confused a lot of analysts. It shouldn't have. Security is not a number. Security is having multiple systems that cannot all fail simultaneously. It is knowing that if one thing breaks, 5 other things are still holding you up. Gen X built financial resilience, not just financial wealth. Those are not the same thing, and the difference matters enormously when the economy decides to test you. Lesson 2. They refuse to perform wealth. This is the one that drives marketers completely insane. Gen X has money. Meaningful, documented, federally verified money. The latest Federal Reserve survey of consumer finances shows the median Gen X household net worth at $243,000, nearly 4 times higher than millennials, nearly 8 times higher than Gen Z. They built this quietly, consistently, and almost entirely out of public view. They don't post about raises, they don't announce new cars, they don't share vacation photos from resorts. They drive vehicles that have long since stopped being impressive. They live in houses they bought 2 decades ago. They eat at local restaurants without a dress code. From the outside, they look like people who are doing fine but nothing remarkable. From their balance sheets, the story is completely different. And this is not humility. This is strategy. When nobody knows you have money, nobody expects you to spend it. You are not competing with your friends' lifestyles. You are not caught in the slow, invisible arms race of consumption that quietly bankrupts people who earn excellent incomes. You are free, genuinely free, to make financial decisions based entirely on what serves your actual goals, rather than what communicates the right message to the people watching. Consider the calculation a typical Gen X mindset runs on a car upgrade. The current vehicle runs perfectly. A replacement would cost $45,000. At 8% average annual returns over 10 years, that $45,000 becomes $97,000. The old car still gets you everywhere the new car would. The question Gen X asks is not, can I afford the new car? The question is, what am I actually trading? The answer is $97,000 for the temporary dopamine hit of driving something newer. Most of them decide that trade is not worth it, not because they can't afford it, because they did the math. Every dollar not spent performing wealth for an audience is a dollar compounding silently in the background. Every possession not purchased is one less object to insure, maintain, store, and eventually replace. Gen X watched their parents stress visibly about money while maintaining expensive appearances. They absorbed that lesson early. They decided that financial security was more valuable than financial performance, and they made that decision quietly, repeatedly, for decades, which is exactly why it worked. If this is shifting something in how you see money, take 2 seconds to hit the like button. It genuinely helps the channel, and I notice every single one. Lesson 3. They made debt work for them instead of against them. Gen X is not anti-debt. That is a common misconception. They are anti-stupid debt. The distinction is everything. Federal Reserve data shows Gen X carries significant mortgage debt but minimal consumer debt. Their average credit card balance is lower than both boomers and millennials. They will borrow $500,000 for a property. They will not finance a $3,000 couch. The principle underneath that apparent contradiction is simple and absolute. Debt is only acceptable when it funds an appreciating asset or generates income. Everything else gets paid in cash or does not get purchased. Here is what this philosophy produced during one of the greatest financial opportunities in modern history. Between 2009 and 2012, while housing prices sat at rock bottom and most people were still too frightened by the crash to act, Gen X was buying. Real estate data from that period shows they were the largest demographic group purchasing investment properties. Mortgages were available at 4.5% on assets that had lost 40% of their peak value. The math was not complicated. Borrow cheap money to acquire a discounted asset likely to appreciate. Gen X did not need a finance degree to see that opportunity. They needed something rarer, the willingness to act while everyone around them was frozen. And they could act because their diversified income streams and years of disciplined saving had given them the financial position to take calculated risks when others could not afford to. The flip side is equally important. Between 2005 and 2007, when housing prices were inflated and neighbors were using home equity like a personal ATM refinancing to buy boats, cars, and renovations, Gen X largely stayed out of that game. They saw the structure clearly. They kept their financial position defensible. When the crash came, they were not underwater. They were positioned to buy. This is the debt philosophy that actually builds wealth across a lifetime. Borrow strategically when assets are undervalued and rates are favorable. Pay down everything else relentlessly. Never use debt to fund consumption. And when economic conditions shift, adjust, because the strategy is not rigid. The principle is lesson 4. They let time do the work they couldn't. Here is where everything Gen X did compounds into a result that looks like magic but is actually just mathematics given enough runway. Consider this precise calculation. Someone who began investing $500 per month in 1998 into a basic index fund, tracking the S&P 500 by January 2024, would have contributed $156,000 of their own money. That account would be worth approximately $520,000. They more than tripled their contribution. Not through perfect timing, not through clever stock picking, through showing up consistently every single month for 26 years, through the dot-com crash that wiped out 49% of the NASDAQ, through the 2008 collapses that took the S&P 500 down 57%, through every terrifying headline that gave a reasonable person genuine cause to stop, Gen X kept going. Vanguard's 2024 research on investor behavior confirms that Gen X has the highest rate of continuous investment contributions over 20 plus years of any generation studied. They did not pause when it was frightening. They did not stop when it was uncomfortable. They understood something that sounds simple but is extraordinarily difficult to actually live. Consistency matters more than the amount. And this is where their self-education paid its greatest dividend. Because they understood compound interest at a structural level, not as a concept, but as a lived reality, they understood the devastating cost of interruption. Money invested in your 30s has 30 years to compound. Money invested in your 50s has 10. That is not a marginal difference. That is the difference between a comfortable retirement and working until your body decides otherwise. But let's be honest about what sustained consistency actually required. $500 per month for 26 years means that amount was protected and prioritized over nicer cars, larger houses, more elaborate vacations, and countless upgrades that would have been entirely justifiable. Gen X made those trade-offs not occasionally, but continuously, month after month, year after year, through recessions and recoveries, and every moment when stopping would have felt completely reasonable. That is the unglamorous, unsexy, unpostable truth about how wealth is actually built, not in the dramatic moments, in the ordinary ones. In the months when nothing exciting is happening and you move the money anyway because that is simply what you do, here are some actionable steps you can take that can change your future right now. Start your financial education this week, not with YouTube algorithms, but with something you have to choose deliberately. Pick one foundational book on investing or personal finance and read it completely. Knowledge you build slowly and thoroughly is knowledge that holds when markets move against you. Audit your income sources this month. Write down every stream of income you currently have. If the answer is 1, that is a single point of failure. Identify one realistic way to create a second stream within the next 6 months. It does not need to be large, it needs to exist. Run the performance math on your next major purchase. Whatever you are considering buying, calculate what that same amount would become in 10 years at 8% annual returns. Then decide with that number visible, not to automatically say no, to make the decision with full information. Review your debt this quarter and categorize each obligation honestly. Which debt funds an asset that appreciates or generates income? Which debt funds consumption? Build a specific plan to eliminate the second category as aggressively as your cash flow allows. Set up automatic investment contributions if you have not already, and then commit to leaving them untouched through the next market correction. That commitment, made in advance before the fear arrives, is worth more than any specific amount you choose. Before I leave, let me tell you this. Go back to those 2 neighbors for a moment. The one who upgraded continuously, performed visibly, and kept his lifestyle perfectly synchronized with his income, he was not foolish. He was following the exact script the culture wrote for him. Buy more when you earn more. Signal success with visible markers. Live in step with your income and trust that things will work out. It is an entirely reasonable way to move through the world. It just does not produce financial freedom. It produces a beautiful surface with nothing underneath it. The neighbor, nobody noticed driving the old car, living in the same house, making no visible moves. She was following a different script. One she had largely written herself, built from deliberate study, expensive mistakes, and a fundamental decision that security was worth more than performance. That script does not require genius. It does not require an exceptional income, or a perfect economy, or a fortunate inheritance. It requires knowledge built carefully over time. Income diversified deliberately across multiple sources. Wealth kept invisible, and therefore protected from social pressure. Debt used only where it generates return. And contributions made consistently month after ordinary month, long enough for time to do what time does to money when you leave it alone. Gen X did not have an easier economy than the one you are navigating. They had multiple recessions, multiple crashes, 2 decades of sustained uncertainty, and every reason to stop that you have ever had. They just played the long game with a quiet discipline that the financial media mostly ignored because it was never interesting enough to write about. The strategies are not secrets. They never were. The only thing that separates people who build wealth from people who spend their lives talking about building it is the willingness to do boring things consistently for longer than feels necessary without an audience. That choice is available to you right now, regardless of what you currently earn, regardless of how old you are, regardless of how many times you have tried before and let it drift. The game is still running. The question is whether you are playing it or watching it. If you are genuinely getting something from this, consider subscribing. I make videos like this every week, and I try to make every single one worth your time. I'm Zik. I'll see you in the next one.